Hey folks, it's Tom, your Frugal Prepper. I'm here with Dante Frigno. He is a carnivore, more of a lion diet type of carnivore than I am. He's lost a lot of weight and improved his health and has some big arms and you know and so I'm just going to kind of do an interview with him and let him talk a little bit about what he does. So how are you doing today, Dante?
I'm doing pretty good, Tom. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. So I guess just I saw your initial videos where you first tried the carnivore diet and everything, but just kind of take us back to the beginning and kind of some of your health problems and how you found the carnivore diet and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I do want to start by pointing out something that I think is a lot of people can probably relate to, and that's the fact that from as young as I can remember, I've struggled with my weight. I remember being in second grade and on the football team, and they used to make me wear a trash bag to run around the track in or to practice in because they were trying to help me get my weight down. And I remember the funny thing is I don't remember, but I see pictures. I remember seeing pictures of when I was like 4 and 5 years old, and I was just a skinny little kid. So I don't know when the switch happened, but I know that I was eating what was supposed to be healthy at the time. My mom would tell me like not to eat mayonnaise, and she would try to avoid making me letting me have red drinks. And I don't know what the deal was with red, but apparently that was something that was on her radar back then. And she tried to help me stay away from sugary drinks, but it seemed like that was all we had was juice and milk, and we ate a lot of cereal. And I remember mac and cheese being a thing. And also, my father had type 2 diabetes late onset. He was 50 when I was born, my age, actually. Can't imagine having a child right now. But he was 50 when I was born, and I know he'd had diabetes for as long as I could remember. I don't know when I noticed, but at some point I realized that he was diabetic because my mom used to always talk about trying to keep him from eating sweets, and she was careful about making sure that the food that we had was healthy to eat. But she was going by the same rules that everybody else was following, which were the standard guidelines out there. And she was feeding us vegetables and a lot of juices and giving us supplements and things that you would think would be healthy. But yet I constantly struggled with my weight. And I'm sure I ate things like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I was into candy bars, man. As a kid, if I could get to the store and get some candy, I would just be happy as I could be. I remember her trying to limit those things, but it never seemed to help. And even when I got into high school, I struggled trying to lose weight, and it was always like a bridge too far. No matter what I did, it would come down a little bit, but then it would go back up very soon. And I always thought it was willpower, and I would beat myself up over it all the time. Later, I joined the wrestling team, and I was wrestling heavyweight because I was 210 pounds. This was my senior year of high school. And I had to get in the ring with guys that were up to 275. And the thing about it is, when you're wrestling heavyweight, your goal is to be 275 because between 190 and 275, that was the only weight class at the time. I understand they've added another weight class just above 189 now because apparently there's so much difficulty with that. But I wasn't going to want to get in the ring with a guy that was 275. So I started jumping rope every day for like 30 to 40 minutes, so much so that my legs just felt like they were going to die. But I was able to get my weight down to 189 and wrestle at the next lower weight class. And that was the first time where I actually felt like, hey, maybe I can do this. But it was difficult to maintain that regular activity enough to stay in that kind of shape and even trying to eat healthy. I remember following all the bodybuilder protocols because I was a big fan of Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno back in the day. And those guys were my idols. I wanted to be able to have a body like Sylvester Stallone, but it sure didn't look like Sylvester Stallone's body. And I thought, well, I can do it if I just work really hard. Either I didn't work really hard enough or I just got tired of fighting it. But eventually the weight started to find its way back on. And I remember in my early 20s, I was already starting to have a few extra pounds here and there. somewhere along the way, I think it was in my late 20s, might have been early 30s. Let's see, what was it? 2006 is when I really started to notice, man, you're really pushing up there in weight. I was over 300 pounds at the time, and I was sitting in a drive-through line at a Taco Bell. And I looked in the side mirror of my truck, thinking about what I was about to order, and I just saw my face and thought, who is that? And I remember driving away without getting any food and said, this is going to be it, because I had been watching my district manager at my work at the time. I was working at Circuit City at the time in Corpus Christi, Texas. And this guy would come to town like every few months. And one time we saw him and he was real heavy. The next time we saw him, he was a little smaller. The next time we saw him, he was a little smaller, until the last time we saw him, he looked like, wow, man, you don't have any weight issues anymore. You're normal and lean and comfortable looking. What have you been doing? I mean, that's when I found out about Atkins diet. Now, for anybody today finding out about Atkins diet, it's a whole different scenario than it was back then. All it was back then was reading the book that Dr. Atkins had written talking about low carb eating. Now, he mixed in some things that aren't on the carnivore diet, but I learned a lot doing the Atkins diet about eating steak every day and eating a lot of tuna fish and eating chicken and pork and pretty much any meat I could get my hands on, even fish and seafood, so fish and shellfish. But I would also eat things like mayonnaise, and I would also have green vegetables, because he told us we should have some green vegetables. He was the first time that I got away from coffee. So I lost like 88 pounds in almost 6 months doing the Atkins diet. But I didn't make a lifestyle change then. I was just doing a diet because I wanted to get in shape. I wanted to lose that weight, and I thought that this would get me there. And slowly the regular foods started to find their way back in. Things that I used to consider healthy, which now I look at and say, well, no, seed oils are not good for you, no matter how you're told you can cook with them and be just fine. That reminds me, I was going to mention my father. My mother used to always give us margarine back in the day. I explain why I was even on Adderall when I was a real little kid. Not Adderall, what did they call it back then? There was another name for the thing that they give to kids that were hyper. But anyway, I think that had a lot to do with it too. Ritalin, yes, thank you very much. And anyway, once I lost the weight, I started eating kind of normal again. And I was still trying to stick with low carb, but not real careful, not like I was when I first started doing the Atkins diet. And then eventually I just started eating whatever was out there that was available. I mean, I was still somewhat careful, but I would eat treats that I wouldn't eat on Atkins at all. And then I would eat out and have all the condiments and whatever sometimes, or I would have it with or without bread if it was a burger or something like that. But it just found its way back into my regular diet. And then later on, let's see, was it 2012? I married my wife that I'm with now, and hopefully forever. But we got real, I guess you could say we got fat and happy together because I ballooned back up. I remember at one time checking my weight and I was back up to 289 pounds. And I think I actually went above that, but I just stopped checking after that instead of making any changes. I decided, oh, I'll just live with it. She's happy with me the way I am. I didn't mind. But then I started having these gut problems when I became the administrator at a retirement home. And I had been doing that for a few years before anything started really getting bad. But it was around the time the ADA started really complicating things for us with as far as dealing with the government. They started making it a lot harder for us to manage our residents properly and give them the care that we needed. And when you're responsible for a small business and the regulators are basically the ones who are in charge and they're just telling you what you can't do, you have a hard time figuring out what you can do. And that was causing me a lot of stress. I think that's a big reason why I started having these gut problems. But the doctors never were able to tell me anything. But the gut problems I were having were like right around my belly button area, which I had had surgery on when they took out my gallbladder back in 2002. They went through the belly button laparoscopically to get to the gallbladder. So I thought maybe that might have something to do with it. And I thought you were going to say something. Sorry. I just remember feeling like it was a black hole, that when I'd wake up in the morning, I felt like all of my energy was being sucked into this hole near my belly button. And it would cause me to feel panicky and make me feel like I just didn't want to get out from under the covers. It was anxiety that was physical. It was permeating my body. It wasn't mental in the sense that I didn't really feel like I had anything to be worried about, but the stress was affecting me physiologically. And I think it was causing some of the problems that were going on. I now think it's basically leaky gut, which has some fuzziness to its diagnosis as well. But the doctors never said anything. They always made me feel like I was kind of insane, or I was making it up. Like they didn't believe that I was having pain. Like maybe I was a pill seeker, somebody that just wanted some pain pills. But I would tell them, I'm not interested in something to relieve the pain. I'm interested in knowing how to make the pain stop. I want to know what I'm doing to cause this, or if there's something physically wrong with me. I started to think maybe it was the mesh that they had put into my gut area, but I had that scanned and they said there was no problems there. They had already done a hernia surgery and supposedly replaced the mesh back in 2005, I think it was, or 2007, after it had been initially put in 2002. So I wasn't getting any answers as to what was wrong with my gut. It was causing me to have mental stress. It was causing me to have a lot of pain. I even wound up waking up in the emergency room, or really I woke up in the hospital room after having been in the emergency room because I was unconscious for the trip over there. And I remember being in there all night long, screaming in pain, wondering why they don't give me something to make me at least feel better while they figure out what's happening, because I couldn't sleep. And the next morning, the doctor came in and he looked at me and he just said, "So, Mr. Ferrigno, what do you want us to do for you?" And I've told this story many times, but that it's still, I can see him just looking at my face as if to say, "You're making this up. This is all in your head. What do you want us to do for you?" That's how it felt when he was asking me that, because I thought, what do you mean? What do you want me to do for you? What do you want? What do I want you to do for me? I want you to fix the problem. I want you to tell me what's wrong. And they didn't have any answers. I had been seeing a gastroenterologist. I'd been seeing my primary care doctor. Now, my gastro doc was telling me that my liver was borderline fatty liver disease. My primary care doc said he didn't see any such thing as that. So I had some confusion as to what was going on. And I was just spending money down these medical alleys trying to find answers and getting absolutely no answers. I had over $20,000 worth of hospital and doctor bills by the time I was found the solution that I didn't know at the time was the solution. But I thought, when I had started listening to Jordan Peterson within a few months before the day that I decided to start Lion Diet. And Jordan Peterson was making a lot of sense about a lot of things that were helping me cope psychologically with some of the things that I was dealing with. And I think he's done a lot for a lot of young men and probably a lot of women too. But I know that the large majority of his audience turns out to be men who were hungry to do the right thing, to have the responsibility and take it on like they're supposed to as men in this world. And he was really helping me get my thoughts organized. But then one day I saw him talking on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him about this all beef diet he was doing. And it was like the record screeched in my head, and I just had to stop and say, what? All beef diet? Because when I studied the Atkins diet, my understanding was you needed to have a green spinach salad along with whatever you were eating as far as all of this meat, because that was what Dr. Atkins said. It said you needed it for this and that and the other. And I thought this can't be true. But also I needed to take a lot of vitamins when I was doing the Atkins diet. If I didn't take a multivitamin and some vitamin C and vitamin D and vitamin E and every other vitamin that I could think of, I was taking probably 10 or 15 different vitamins when I was doing the Atkins diet. And I was also taking what is that? The legal part of fen that's still available. I think it's called phentermine. I was using phentermine that first 6 months I was on Atkins too, to control my appetite. So I thought, how am I going to be able to do only meat, not doing vitamins? Because I done a little research after I heard him talk about it, and I looked into what Michaela Peterson, his daughter, had looked into to find the answers that were healing her and that were healing Dr. Peterson of all of his issues. And I thought, if this worked for so many things for them, maybe this is the solution for my gut problems. Plus, I know from my experience on Atkins, I'll lose some weight, but I was also very curious to see how I was going to respond to not having the vitamins and the greens that I thought were so necessary for me to have energy when I was doing the Atkins diet. Because one time I didn't take vitamins on Atkins diet for like 4 days. I felt like I was going to die. I was supposed to go to work that day, and I had to call in because I had so little energy I couldn't get off the couch. I was just exhausted, and I slept for like 2 days, and then I started taking vitamins during those 2 days so that I could get back to normal. So I always thought that you just couldn't eat only meat, because even when I was doing what I was doing, it caused that. But then when I heard Michaela talking about the key was sodium for electrolytes, that what you're really depleted of was not vitamins, but electrolytes, it was like a light went off in my head. That's what I need. That was missing before. So I started adding not only salt to my meat, but I would also put a little salt in my water that I would drink almost all the time. I would take a little grinder, and I'd grind about 15 times, not full all the way around, but just normal quarter turns or whatever, of salt into my water that I would drink. And I mostly did club soda since I've been doing this diet. I also used mineral water, but I used club soda to get off of diet soda and regular soda a long time before I started doing this. So that really helped me to get to that point. But I didn't want to leave my bubbles behind. I didn't want to go to just water. I was always somebody that hated the idea of drinking water. And the sodium not only helped me have the energy that I needed, but I got to where I love the flavor of having my soda with a little salt in it. So that's kind of what got me to that point, to where on January 14th, 2021, I decided to turn on my camera and make a log of what I was doing, because I'd already had a YouTube channel, doing a video gaming thing I had been doing for a year with my son. And I only had maybe 300, 400 followers at the time, subscribers, I guess you say. And when I made that video after 125 days on Lion Diet, it just went crazy. But when I started that first recording, I was literally just thinking, I'm going to try this for 6 weeks. We're going to show my progress in a video, and maybe it'll be something that will help people to lose a little weight, feel a little better, because I knew it was going to come out good on that part. But I had no idea that it was going to be so life-changing.
So you said you don't have a gallbladder, which I don't either. I'm just curious, like what caused you to get it removed? For me, it was severe gallstones and pancreatitis that landed me in intensive care for a week or two, and the most incredible pain I've ever felt. So what caused you to lose it? And do you have to watch how much fat you eat or anything now because of it?
Well, in 2002, I was out with my first wife. I think it was right around our anniversary, actually. And I had been out that evening with her. We went to a Mexican restaurant. We had a few margaritas. And then I got very ill after the meal. And I thought, well, it could be the drinks, it could be the Mexican food, could be a little mixture of both. I didn't know what. But I had been having these weird chest pains that were related to back pain, too.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to the doctor and tell him it hurts in my back, but it also hurts in my chest. I can't tell where the pain is coming from. And it turned out that it was gallstones. And the gallstones were causing pain here, but it was radiating backwards and forwards. And your organs I don't think your organs have anything for feeling, but it was affecting the nerves around them. And it was causing me to feel pain in my back and pain in my chest. And when I was there in the hospital, it felt just like that. And I would try to describe it to him, But then they did the sonogram and they said, oh, you're full of gallstones. That's why. And one of the things I had been doing for several years, I remember all the way back to when I was telling you I was following Stallone and all them for dietary advice, that the big thing was low fat dieting, avoiding fat, not avoiding sugar, avoiding fat. And I had been doing low fat dieting as much as I possibly could. Now, I didn't always watch it. Like I said, I was eating Mexican food that night, and who knows? I mean, I guess refried beans, and I don't know what kind of fat content they have, but I wasn't really concerned about it then. But I had done a lot of low carb dieting in my life, or low fat dieting in my life, not low carb. And I truly believe today that's the reason why, because the bile in your gallbladder is what helps you break down fat. And if you're not consuming fat, your gallbladder's not releasing bile to deal with it. And if it just sits and sits and sits, it crystallizes, because they couldn't tell me what caused the gallbladder to have gallstones. They couldn't tell me where it came from or how it happened. In retrospect, I kind of feel like they knew, but it was one of those things that either doctors gave up on because they don't think they can get people to change the way they eat by telling them that that would make their lives better, or they just didn't know. I don't know which one, but I truly believe today it was because I was doing a lot of low fat dieting that it caused the gallstones to be there. Now, the thing about, you asked about digesting fat, is initially when I started doing Lion Diet, I was eating a lot of hamburger that was like 80-20, and I was eating a lot of New York strip steak. That was the most common thing I bought because it was less expensive than ribeye. And I still had this notion in my head that you would cut the fat off. I didn't think about consuming a lot of fat. I just was thinking eat the meat. That's all I was considering. So I was basically doing a low fat version of this early on, but it was still, there was a lot of animal fat there because I ate every bit of everything. I didn't trim the meat anymore, but I also found out later on that when you buy it from the store already on the shelf, they've usually trimmed the fat as much as they can because they assume most people are going to want the fat trimmed. So I'd say I ate that way for probably 6 or 7 months, if not longer. But I started adding butter around 7 or 8 months in to my diet, and started experimenting a little bit more with fat about a year in. And then I started to notice a big difference in the way I could sleep. And I was having dreams again. And I thought, wow, fat really is an important part of this. But by then, I think my bile duct, this is what I've researched, is that if you're using a lot of fat or enough fat to get your bile flowing, that the channel between your gallbladder and wherever it enters your system, there's a duct there, a bile duct, that your bile duct will actually dilate some and make more room for bile to sit in. So it kind of acts like a smaller version of a gallbladder. At least that's the best way I can describe it. I'm not a doctor, but I've heard Dr. Berry describe it before. And I've also heard Dr. Brownstone talk about it. He wrote some books about iodine and about salt too. But that extra bile production must be there because I can consume fat like crazy and I don't have any issues that I've noticed anyway. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's an issue and what's causing it too. But like, I'll get into it later, but I recently found out that for about the past 6 months, I've been having some vegetable oils with my food that I didn't know I was having because I was getting them from a local restaurant. And they misspoke when they told me what they were using and what they weren't using. But anyway, so I mean, it can be real confusing when you're trying to figure stuff out and you don't even know that what you're eating is causing you a problem. But for 2 years, I had no issues when I was making all my own food. But anyway, that extra production must make the difference for me because I haven't had any real problems. I haven't ever used ox bile. I did try liver pills for a little while, but then I found that I actually like liver, so I stopped using those. I try not to use a whole lot of supplements in general, but I haven't tried ox bile yet. Who knows? Maybe if I tried it, I might find that it actually helps a little bit. But I remember you telling me in our interview when you were on my channel that you had to use ox bile, but I didn't have pancreatitis.
Yeah, I
So
had
maybe that's the big difference.
have really severe pancreatitis. I mean, I showed up at the hospital. I was sure I was having like a massive heart attack, and they were trying to get my insurance information. I just grabbed my chest and fell down on the floor. I mean, it was
Yeah,
it
I
smelled. It
remember
felt
that.
like somebody was sticking a sword in me that was red hot and just twisting it around. I mean, it was bad. And they
Yeah.
found out I wasn't having a heart attack. They gave me Demerol and Dilaudid, and put me in intensive care. They told me the next day when I was in ICU, I was the sickest person in the hospital right then. Um, yeah, it took like a week or so, and then they finally did the surgery, and things started to get better. But now, if I eat way too much fat, because I'll go more than 50-50 sometimes, because I really love butter, and
Hmm.
I'll start to feel a little bit of pancreatitis. It just gets a little sore down there. And when I'll know it gets really bad is when I just like take a few bites of food and I feel like I'm full, even though I've only eaten a few bites of food. That's when I know it's getting ready to flare up. So I'll have to take
Mm.
extra ox bile then, you know. But the last couple of weeks, I
Okay.
haven't really had to take too much of it. So, but that's because my pancreas has already been, you know, severely irritated. And if it gets real bad, I'll have to go to the hospital and get put on morphine. So, um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
nobody wants that. I do remember that Demerol though. I felt like, okay, this is what I've been missing
oh
when I
yeah.
was in pain. When I was in pain, that sure shut it up.
And
But
they hit
then I
me with
was
the
out too.
Demerol, and that helped. And then they hit me with the Dilaudid right after that, and that really helped. But then as I was in there longer and longer, it starts to kind of not help as much, and you're still in pain. And I had some doctor that was like, "No, you don't need any more," and blah blah blah. And I
Yeah.
finally called the surgeon and had her paged at 3 in the morning because she had come and saw me. And I told her, like, look, I'm in so much pain right now that I'm okay if I die. I mean, I'm okay jumping out the window and dying right now. You know, I've had a good life. And she was like, "Oh, we're gonna increase your pain medicine." And she like doubled my Demerol. And that got me through to the
Mm.
surgery. But yeah.
Yeah. It was not fun even weaning off of that. I remember it was stink when you go to the bathroom. It had a weird smell to it when you were getting off of Demerol. I just remember that, but I
Yeah.
hated coming off of it because it was just you felt like everything was fine if you had that.
Yeah. I was on
I'm
it for
glad it's over.
I was on it for so long in the hospital that like when they actually took my gallbladder out and I felt that relief, I didn't have any more pain medications except I had two Vicodin that they gave me the next morning, and I was like, just give me some Tylenol, I'm fine, you know. And because I was in so much pain that the staples and stuff from the surgery were just nothing, you know. But yeah, so it's it's pretty crazy. And I know for like a week or two everything tasted like metal um from
Yeah.
from being on those drugs. Yeah. So um I guess what kind of foods are you eating now exactly? On like explain to people what the lion diet is. I'm more of a carnivore and I eat a few vegetables, but you're pretty much pure just beef, aren't you?
Yeah, pretty much pure beef. The difference between carnivore and lion diet is that lion diet is a carnivore diet that is even more restrictive than just standard carnivore, because a carnivore can eat anything animal product. Some carnivores realize that they can't do dairy, so they still have to avoid the dairy products. I'm one of those too, unfortunately, because I still love butter, but even butter affects me slightly negatively. It usually gives me like a little congestion in my throat, but it's not so bad that I can't live with. If it comes down to not having butter, I'd rather have the butter and live with the every once in a while. Uh, but when you're on lion diet, and this was for the first 7 months, I was very strict about it. It's only meat from ruminant animals, and that would be cows, buffalo, bison, elk, deer. I think camels and giraffes fall into that category, although I haven't seen any of those on the store shelves. I might have given them a try. Lamb, goat, and lamb was another go-to for me a lot during the beginning. Also, I had a whole freezer full of deer that I had saved up over the past 4 seasons of hunting. So I wound up using up a lot of deer meat that I had been saving. And that was what I ate. And initially, I started making a lot of food at once because I knew the hard thing was going to be wanting that ice cream, wanting that peanut butter, wanting all those sweet things that I still missed, and wanting bread and ketchup and mayonnaise and all the other things. And that if I didn't have something ready to eat at all times, that I would very likely go to something that's ready made like that to get my craving fulfilled. So I would make like a whole plate full of hamburgers to last for a few days, or I'd make a whole grill full of steaks or a mixture of things. That way I would have Ziploc bags full of food, and then I could just stick them in the microwave for a little bit and warm them up. And then eventually I learned that you could stick them in the air fryer and warm them up and not zap them with all those radiation waves and make the food even worse for you. But that was my initial thing, was making sure that I had food ready to eat, because I didn't want to fail because I wouldn't wait to cook something. And that was something that I wasn't good at doing anyway. I didn't like cooking to begin with. I like the idea of either my wife making something for me or we go out to a restaurant. I was the administrator of a retirement home, so I could just have the cook there make me something to eat. And it was easier to do it that way. But when I started this, I realized I am going to have to take full control over what I'm eating, or this isn't going to work. So I started cooking. I started first on a pan, which made a mess everywhere. Then I started trying it on a propane grill, and that was always a bigger mess to clean up than I wanted to have to deal with. I mean, I'm used to being a lazy way of preparing food, mostly getting it to go or somebody else making it for me. So switching to those things was a lot extra work that I wasn't used to in my daily life, and I was already stressed. So when I finally found the air fryer about 2 or 3 months into this, and how good steaks come out of an air fryer, I haven't looked back. I've been using an air fryer ever since. And that has been a good thing, because as I got to where I didn't have the cravings that I used to have, I stopped making a ton of food at once and started just making it when I was hungry, because air fryer would take about 16 minutes to get a steak or two ready. Later on, I learned some other tricks with the air fryer, like cooking from frozen, which takes a little longer. And now I use a fancier air fryer that actually kind of uses a probe to determine the inside meat temperature and keep it cooking evenly across at the same time, which can take up to an hour to be done right. But nowadays I can wait. It's not like it was when I first started, where I couldn't overcome those cravings. One of the things you do on a diet like this, I think, is you learn to start listening to your body better, and you learn the difference between real hunger cues and just a cue that's saying, I feel anxious, I feel nervous, I need something to eat, I don't feel comfortable right now, so I'm going to eat some comfort food, and just turn that off. Eventually it got to where that wasn't a problem for me. I do still have a difficult time when I'm around it, when it's ready and available, but thankfully my wife and my kids don't put it in my face, even if they're still going to eat it. And they've started to eat a lot healthier since I've been eating this way too. But if I were telling you what I make today I had chuck roast. Is pretty much all I've had today. I've had about 1.5 pounds of chuck roast so far, and I'm planning on having a little bit of ribeye later tonight. I don't normally have 2 meals in a day, but it varies. Sometimes I do 1 meal a day, sometimes I do 2. Very rarely do I do 3. I used to think you had to eat a bunch of meals. Like when I did Atkins, I was doing 5 or 6 small meals a day. Now I realize I can get it all done in 1 meal and usually make it through the day without any difficulty, and wake up the next morning and feel like, wow, I've been fasting for close to 24 hours now. It's time to get something to eat. But that fasting is also helps with metabolism, helps you to stay skinnier, and just keeps you healthy. So that, I guess they call it intermittent fasting.
Yep.
And I'm going to be picking up a whole cow from a local rancher. Well, not local for me. He's up in Georgia and I'm down in Florida. But he does such a good job raising these cattle. And as a matter of fact, I'll be interviewing him soon. We spoke. This is Miles Moore. He's the owner of Big Mo Cattle, And I did a whole video about him 2 years ago when I first met him, so I could see what his farm looked like and hear him talk about the regenerative style farming that he does and how he raises these cows only on grass, no chemicals, no pesticides, no vaccines, no antibiotics. They're raised healthy, and they come out fat and happy, and they make delicious meat that's very good omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. And I've been wanting to switch to where that is all I eat, because I got to where I don't really trust the store-bought stuff. I don't know what to think about the big four meat packers, because they seem like they're in with this whole 2030 agenda thing. So I get a little worried about what they might be putting in the meat. But I would love it if I could eat the meat that Big Mo makes all the time, because it is just healthy and delicious. It comes out much better than most any store-bought grass-fed I've bought. And I'm going to be eating a lot more of the whole cow. Typically, I eat a lot of ribeye, because I know that Publix will run ribeyes on sale at Christmas, Easter, and Labor Day. And they used to do them for $5.99 a pound for rib roasts, whole rib roasts. And I would just have them cut those into bone-in ribeyes, or I'd have them cut the ribs off and just make ribeyes out of them. And at $5.99 a pound, it's like, geez, that's how much chuck roast is a lot of times. You're even lucky to get it at $5.99 a pound. So to be able to buy ribeye at that price is great. Now, last time, this past Easter, they were $6.99 a pound, but that's just the cost of inflation there. And like I say, if I can buy a whole cow and keep it around that $6 to $7 a pound, and it's going to be right around $7 a pound once the net of meat actually comes out of the cow, then it's something I can afford to do. And I like to try to eat the whole animal anyway, just because it feels like I'm cherry picking too much when I eat ribeye all the time, because that's such a small portion of the cow, and we can't all possibly eat that way. So I try to do my part as much as I can by eating as much of the whole animal as I can. And I want to be able to get to where I can do that more often. The problem is that when I place an order with Miles over at Big Mo Cattle, a lot of times he'll tell me, okay, well, like this February, I told him I want a whole beef. Well, I'm not picking it up until next week now. That's how long it has taken for me to get a cow from him, because he has so many people in line that are waiting for one already, and he's not going to send one to slaughter before it's ready. He's going to make sure that it's fat and that it's eaten right and it's not ever touched a lick of grain. So it's worth the wait. But when I order one, it's almost like I have to order another one right when I pick up this one if I want to have one ready to go. I've calculated it out. I pretty much could, between me and what little my family eats compared to me, we could do 3 cows a year.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you like your meat like really rare? Have you ever eaten raw meat? Do you cook it well done? How do you cook your meats?
I've tried raw before. I guess they call it tartare. It wasn't my thing. I just didn't enjoy eating it that way. I love the flavor of meat by itself. I used to try marinades back in the day, and I did when I was on Atkins, and I just never really liked them. But it was like the only way that I could make the meat where I guess it didn't taste bland, until I found out about cooking with salt, because that was one of the things about Lion Diet. It's ruminant meat, water, and salt. Salt was a huge part of Lion Diet. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try. I never realized how good meat could taste until I started cooking only with good, clean salt. And I only use Redmond real salt. I will use Himalayan pink salt in a pinch, but if I have a choice between the two, Redmond actually tastes better. And I have to admit, they're an affiliate of mine now, but that's because I love their salt so much. I asked to be an affiliate because I wanted to be able to tell people about this fantastic stuff that's made right here in America, and that it doesn't come from a regular modern seabed where there's all kind of shipping pollution and things involved in it and microplastics. It's an ancient seabed. So, but once I tasted the difference, because table salt tastes bad to me, but this salt, natural, regular salt, whether Himalayan or Redmond, tastes a whole lot different to me than table salt. Table salt is stripped of all of its trace elements and it's made white. I want to say bleached, but I don't think they technically bleach it. But whatever they do, it's designed to make it look pretty in the jar. And it's not about being nutritionally better for you. Even though they add iodine to table salt, it's only like 10% bioavailable for you to take in anyway. So I never gave much consideration to the iodine. Although I do supplement with iodine now. I found that I was iodine deficient and that it's helped ever since I've been supplementing that. Let's see. I forget what you asked me just before.
Well, like, do you usually cook your meat kind of rare, or is it more well
That's
done?
right. Rare and
Medium?
how to do it. Yeah, the key was I was pointing out was that I use salt to cook it with. Now, medium rare is my favorite way to make steak. Although, if you can get the exterior crispy enough, I don't mind if the interior is medium. If it gets to medium well or even well done, then it's too tough to cook. I too tough to eat. I don't like medium well to well done. But medium rare is my favorite. Medium is good because I do like a good crispy exterior, which is something I learned to do when I was cooking steaks from frozen. I would take the steak and put it in the air fryer, and instead of putting it in for like 16 minutes and flipping it halfway through, it took longer, closer to 23 minutes for an average size steak, about a pound or so of steak. And then I would flip it halfway through. And because it was at 400 to 450 degrees, I usually use my air fryer would go up to 450. Not a lot of air fryers do that, by the way. Most of them stop at 400, but I would do it at 450 degrees, and it would just come out so crispy on the outside, but medium on the inside. The only drawback is I would notice there was that thin gray line around the outside, and that's basically a sign of overcooked meat. So the exterior was getting cooked too much while the interior was finally getting done. And it wasn't until I started using the Dreo Chef Maker, which I've talked about in other videos too. And I'm not here to try to market any products. I'm just telling you this thing kind of changed my life again, because it uses a probe and it measures the meat internally and externally, and it cycles up and down with the temperature so that it'll keep it cooking at the same level so that it's not overcooking. It's kind of like sous vide in that regard, that they're slowly bringing it up to temperature, and it takes longer. It takes up to an hour if you're using the sous vide setting on there. And it also uses water to mix in to help keep the moisture level high. Air fryers already produce the most moist. They produce steaks with the most moisture because you're not losing it in a fire pit or something like that. But this one really added even more. And for the last 4 or 5 months, that's the way I've been cooking my steaks, is in the Chef Maker, because it does such a good job.
So you talked about the crowns in your teeth. Have you noticed a difference in your teeth since you started carnivore? I know I haven't had to go to the dentist. I haven't had any cavities since I started keto and now carnivore. Have you noticed your teeth getting healthier, your gums getting healthier, things like that?
Yes, and I have gone to see my dentist because I've gone regularly for cleanings for so many years, because I would always get this buildup of plaque on the backside of my bottom teeth. And I think it had a little bit to do with the fact that I was vaping for the first year or so, which has sweetener in it. And I believe the sugar was getting into my teeth and still causing some buildup there. But for the most part, after that, I started to notice my teeth never felt like they had plaque on them. Not how when you wake up, or at least the way it used to be for me, you wake up in the morning, if you hadn't brushed your teeth the night before, it would feel like they were all bumpy on the surface. You'd rub your tongue over your teeth and you could just feel the plaque there, and you have to go brush your teeth and get it off. I don't brush all that often, even to this day. I've always had a problem with it. I do floss every single time I eat, but I don't brush every day. And yet, every day my teeth feel clean and slick, like they're brand new. My gums don't bleed. That probably has a little to do with the fact that I keep them working by chewing and also by flossing. So that gives my gums a lot of strength. And even when I've gone to see the dentist, they were just impressed that I didn't have a lot of bleeding like most of their customers do when they start poking around with metal pieces and flossing you and things like that, and that I didn't have a lot of plaque or tartar buildup. So I've noticed that it's somewhat changed the shape of my jaw a little bit too, because that constant chewing early on, I remember thinking, gosh, if I chew this long, it just makes me tired. Now it doesn't bother me because my jaw's gotten used to the extra chewing. And then I've done research since then and found that, our faces these days are distorted by the food we've been eating, the mush that we chew on all the time that doesn't have any strength to it. Like so many people eat peanut butter and applesauce, which were developed specifically for people who didn't have teeth, yet we eat them all the time. And then that's the kind of thing that makes all those muscles start to atrophy, is we're not using those muscles properly. And then it becomes a genetic problem, because you pass that on to your kids. When you start having an issue where you're not eating something that's actually using those muscles, it changes your genetic makeup, because you'll have kids that are born with smaller mouths and distorted teeth. But yet when you go back and you look at the archaeological records and they find old skulls and things like that, they don't find teeth that are crooked and jammed into somebody's mouth because their wisdom teeth came in. They're all nice and straight. For the most part, they're nice and straight, unless they got hit with something in the mouth. And it made me wonder, it made me really look at what I was doing when I'm chewing like that. And then looking into some other videos that talked about how that's exactly how we can get our jaws to be the right shape and actually have our teeth fit in our mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I also have seen on your videos where you were lifting some weights, some of those home weights, and I've been trying to start lifting some weights at the Planet Fitness, but I always get busy and then I don't get over there. Tell us a little bit about like how your muscles have developed and how you're lifting weights and some of the exercise that you do too, walking with the big 40-pound vest on or whatever, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I've always been strong since I can remember as being a teenager, is that I was built fairly well. I remember bodybuilders telling me that you've got the genetics for this. And I thought, well, that's good to know. Now, if I could just keep this fat off, it would be something. So even when I was overweight, I knew I still had a good frame underneath. I could feel the muscle was there. But when I started losing the fat, it was like, wow, it actually looks good now. It doesn't just, look like a big, huge arm or a big, huge leg. I used to think about, there was a comedian that was talking about how when, what do they call those things? Boxer briefs came out, that was the greatest thing in the world, because jockey shorts would just ruin a guy that had big fat legs like I do. He would talk about how, well, jockey shorts are for somebody with one leg here and one leg here and just a whole bunch of negative space up in the middle. And I never had that. And now when I stand up, I have that negative space. And it's like, I didn't know this was the size of my legs. I always thought that was muscle, or that was just the normal size, and that I was stuck with that. So that has been wonderful. But when I started to realize that I was losing the weight, it made me start thinking, well, one, I've been wanting to exercise a long time, but number two, I had the energy to exercise. I actually started off just doing 10 push-ups in the morning, 10 push-ups at noon, and 10 push-ups in the evening. I would set a reminder on my iPhone to remind me to do 10 push-ups, because I figured no matter where I was, I could stop and do 10 push-ups. It wouldn't take that long. Before long, I started putting that to 20 push-ups on each of those sets, and then 30. And then I was just doing 50 at a time and 50. It took a while to get there. It didn't happen overnight. But I was amazed because I had never done 50 push-ups at one time before. And I got to where I was doing a couple hundred a day for a while. I found out afterward that you shouldn't be just working on one muscle every day, and that I was doing them wrong. I was doing them with my hands way out to the sides, and I started to learn about keeping your body mechanics right for doing push-ups. And then I also started adding walks. I started doing walks because I just felt like I needed to get out and get some of this energy out. And I started taking my camera with me when I would go, because I wanted to be able to talk about the exercise or talk about how much happier I was just because of doing this way of eating. And then that turned into a regular thing for quite a while, because while we were trying to move, it was harder for me to record my story. We were so discombobulated and all of our stuff was everywhere, and we were trying to get from Georgia to Florida. And then when we got down here, I didn't even have internet connection on the property I'm on. I'm trying to maintain a YouTube channel without an internet connection at all. And it was hard because I would have to record everything, then go up to the local bar, which is the closest place where I could get an internet connection 3 miles away. And he would let me connect to his Wi-Fi and I could upload my video from there. And I was doing walk and talks to try to maintain everything because it was just so chaotic after we moved here. They got to be really popular with people, so I kept doing those. Then I also started adding squats, air squats. And then I had this new machine that I had bought, rather somebody sent to me to try out, and I never got around to really representing the product too well. I tried to. It was called a Power Tower, but I liked it because it allowed me to do dips. It had this thing where you put your arms on and you hold on to those two poles, and then you could do your leg lifts. And then you could also do the front handles and do dips on there. So it was working the triceps. It had a pull-up bar so that I could get the pull-ups in. And it had a bench on the other side, which was great so that I could do crunches and things like that. So I started adding a little bit more of these different exercises and mixing them up on different days. And all last year, all of 2022, I was just nailing it. I was getting my walks in 3 miles every day. I was doing either 100 squats or 100 push-ups while I was doing the walk. When I was at home, I would get the extra dips in, or I would use some dumbbells that I had for bicep curls. Then I started working at UPS. And that was in the end of November in 2022. And they worked me so doggone hard for the amount of whatever amount of hours I was there every day. Sometimes it would be 10 to 12 hours. Sometimes it would just be 6 hours. But it was like nonstop. Don't stop going. Don't stop moving. Don't stop lifting. And I was getting so much exercise from that. It kind of got me away from doing my regular walk and talks. It got me away from exercising at home. I was working through the middle of the night, so it was disrupting my sleep schedule. And then at one point during working at UPS, I hurt my back and I thought I could push through. I thought I was going to be okay, but it was something I struggled with. And I talked about it on my channel some. I finally started going to see massage therapists and a chiropractor, and it finally got to where it was back in shape. But ever since then, I've been a little derailed on the exercising, except for the fact that on my new job, because I had to leave UPS, after the holidays were over, they were cutting hours down to 2 and 3 hours at a time. It wasn't even worth it for me to drive all the way to work to get 2 or 3 hours of work. And I left there and I started working in-room dining at a 5-star hotel. It has or rather, I don't know if you call it a 5-star hotel. It's a luxury hotel that has a 5-star restaurant in it. And they would get in-room dining. Well, I was pushing this cart around on the rug. So it had all the weight of all these heavy plates and food. So it was a lot of resistance. And I had been doing, rucking with the 40-pound pack, which that took a while to build up to getting where I could do 40 pounds. But I'd done most of my walking at work lately. So that's one of the reasons I haven't recorded as much. And because I can't record when I'm walking down the hall of a hotel. And that's been what it's been mostly lately. I've been trying to get back into it. But as I mentioned before, I found out recently that a place I've been getting food at has been using a vegetable oil that I didn't realize they were using on the meat. And I'd been wondering why I was having a few symptoms, like I was starting to see rosacea again on my face. And I was starting to have a little bit of anxiety that I hadn't had before, like physical, palpable anxiety, not just feeling confused or something like that. And I also, what was it? I had weight gain. I had weight gain between the time that I started eating this food and recently that I couldn't explain because I thought maybe I was eating more meat than I was before. And I was, but it was more than that. It was the seed oils. So I'm hoping now that I've finally just recently in the past week isolated that problem, and I'm now back to cooking all of my own food and making sure that I'm either going out prepared not to eat whatever I'm going to be at, whether it's at work or a pub event, that I'll be able to get back into the exercise regimen that I'm used to, where I used to wake up and just be ready to go. Those seed oils really knocked me back in these past 6 months.
Yeah, the seed oils were causing me to have macular degeneration. So I was
Oh, my vision has depleted some too. I thought it was because I've been looking at small screens so much since I've been doing this channel, because my vision did get better in the first 2 years. But in the last 6 months, I've noticed that especially my close-up vision isn't as good as it was when I started doing the diet.
yeah. So you said that you
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh, you're fine. You said that you vaped. So did you used to be a smoker? Because I am still a smoker. I'm down from 2 packs a day to less than a half a pack a day. I don't need nearly as many, and I'm planning on quitting soon. But I'm just kind of curious because you said you were vaping.
I was I was exposed to smoking at an extremely young age. I mean, growing up in the early 70s was a very unique time period. And I lived in South Florida. And I remember being under the age of 10 and we had already started smoking. I didn't really start smoking regular though until I hit 15 years old. And that became the Marlboro Lights was my thing. Later on, it was Marlboro Reds. Later on, it was Camels. Later after that, it was Camel Unfiltered. Heck, I was up to 3 packs a day at one point in my early 20s. I started cutting that back and cutting that back. And then I tried to quit. I think I quit around 2005, 2006 once because I used Chantix to get off of smoking. And then eventually I started smoking a little more again because I missed the hand to mouth more than I missed the nicotine. And I just wanted to get back in that habit. I mean, it's so amazing what habits we find interesting or that make us feel better. But that was something that brought me back to smoking. The funny thing about vaping is I had actually quit smoking again for the who knows how many times that I had tried to quit. By the time I found vaping, I had already left smoking behind for the most part, except for if we had a night drinking or something like that with a bunch of friends, I might have a cigarette or two, but I hadn't gotten back into smoking cigarettes. But then somebody came along with a vape pen and they were talking about all the benefits of it, how it didn't have any of the carcinogens that cigarettes have. And I thought, well, if I can enjoy what I used to enjoy and get something to puff on that tastes a little good, because I like that you could get sweet flavors with it, I said, okay, I'll give it a try. Before long, I didn't have a little pen. I had one of the big box mods with a big, huge tank on it. And I was blowing huge things of vape. And it's so weird because I thought it was so cool back then. And I look at vaping now and I think, God, it just looks awful. Why in the world was I doing that? But that was something else that I was still doing when I started doing Lion Diet. It just got to the point where I was being so careful about everything I was eating. I started to ask, well, why am I sucking on this thing that's giving me sugary vape? That's getting me to want sugary things. It might even be giving me I forget what they call it. It's like a cephalic insulin response, where the taste buds send a message to your pancreas to start producing insulin because it tastes sugar. And I thought, well, maybe it'd be better if I could quit this. Plus, people always ask, how do you afford to eat meat all the time? Well, it's a lot harder when you're spending an extra $100 to $150 a month just on yourself for vaping. So cutting that out would have been a helpful thing for that as well. And I slowly weaned myself off by reducing the nicotine content. I went all the way down to 3 milligrams, which was the lowest that you could buy at the time. Then the place I was buying it from started making a 1.5 nicotine load. And then I started using those. And then I started using a non-nicotine and a 1.5 and mixing them together in the same tank so that I was getting basically 0.75 nicotine. And then I eventually switched to zero nic, and I went back and forth from that to 0.75 for a while. It took me probably a good 4 months to quit vaping once I started weaning off of it. But I remember there was one day where I finally put it down and said I could leave it down all day long. I had been trying for a few days to leave it somewhere and not go get it, to get out of the habit of having it. And once I was able to make it through one day, that was it. I just said, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. And I haven't looked back.
What I've noticed, like, from being in your Facebook group and stuff, that while you're on a pure lion diet, you kind of support people doing keto or doing vegetables if they can handle it. I mean, you're not really against that. Like, a lot of really lion diet people are like, no, you can't have a piece of broccoli, which I think is really neat. Your Facebook group is really supportive of a lot of different people, and there's a lot of different perspectives in there. What would you tell somebody that is sick and fat and maybe having some medical problems? How do they get started on this, or how do they go about it?
Okay. Well, to address the issue that you're bringing up real quick about why I support people doing different things, is that my wife was not interested in changing her diet initially. And my kids weren't interested in changing their diet initially. And I realized the more that I tried to push them in that direction, the more refusing they were of doing it. So as the diet progressed and they started to see the changes in me, they started to take a little bit more interest and wanting to try it more. Especially my youngest son got to where he's like, anytime you got steak, I'm ready for some steak. He still likes his cereal, and he still likes, getting a Coke every once in a while. As much as I've tried to beat that out of him, not beat it out of him, but to get him to where he doesn't want to do it. I try to remind him. I mean, that stuff's got high fructose corn syrup and citric acid and all kind of garbage you just don't want in your system. But he's an addict. I know what it's like to be an addict, and I know a lot of people are going to be living with people that they love. And when you find something like what Lion Diet has done for me, if you become a pure zealot for what works for you, it's going to turn a lot of people off to even listening to you, because they're maybe not willing to go that far. But one of the things that I learned is if you can cut out the seed oils, if you can cut out the processed food, that you can live a lot happier and healthier than you will eating that garbage. So I don't mind pushing my family into that direction, where they're at least eating vegetables that my wife grew and meat that I've brought home, and maybe dabbling in some of that stuff, but not eating out all the time. They're not getting Little Caesars pizzas multiple times a week, and McDonald's is not on the credit card all the time anymore, because my wife has started to cut some of those things out. And if I had been constantly pushing on her that she's got to do it this way, I might have pushed her right out of our marriage. And I don't want to encourage anybody to push anybody away from them because they found something that's a big answer for them. This is the tough thing about eating. Eating is a huge part of our social structure. Whenever you go out with anybody, eating and drinking are involved in some way, one or the other or both. And it's almost impossible to have a social event that doesn't involve one or both. And nowadays, when I was growing up, I remember dancing was a thing. We don't even go out and dance hardly anymore. The only thing people tend to do to go out and enjoy a night out together, they go to a restaurant, or they go to the movie theater and they load up on popcorn and sodas and candy. So, I mean, either way, it's all about consuming something that makes you feel a little bit better for a while. Well, it's hard for people to adjust their whole life to this. So I try to at least let them know that there's hope if you can get away from some of the garbage stuff, the really, really bad stuff. I started talking about ingredients a lot more on my channel and helping people who are not really ready to go full Lion Diet. And maybe Lion Diet's not important for everybody. Not everybody had the same issues I had, or the same issues that Jordan Peterson had. And not very many people I've ever heard of had the same issues that Michaela Peterson had. So I would say Lion Diet is for those who are in that extreme moment that realize, if I don't do something, I'm going to die or I'm going to kill myself, one or the other. That's where Lion Diet comes in, where when you've got to make a change, or it's going to be a bad ending. And I wanted to provide for my family. I want to take care of my wife and my kids. I don't want to leave them behind with a mess. So Lion Diet was my solution. But my wife is not in that same position. She feels mostly comfortable with herself. I've tried to encourage her because she has aches and pains that she can't explain. And I keep telling her, if you would just go full carnivore with me, at the very least for a month, you would see a huge difference. And she believes me, but she hasn't been able to pull the trigger on it. It's kind of like the Bible talks about Jesus saying that a prophet is not only welcome everywhere, but his hometown. When you start talking to those you love about this, it's the one thing that turns them off the most. They don't want to hear it because they know what you've been like before, and they know how much of a screw up you were. So they don't want to hear how perfect you are now. And I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but when you start doing things like quitting smoking, quitting drinking, quitting eating bad foods, not eating out, not doing things that are unhealthy for you, it judges them even when you don't say a word. So you've got to be delicate with those you care about. And I've just been trying to encourage her to at least get out some of the garbage. She's been able to quit drinking, which has been a tremendous health boost for her health, because she was a beer lover. I mean, some people that just got to have their beer every day. That was my wife. And now, I remember her saying today, I thought about getting a beer the other night, and I just decided I don't want to go back to that. And I'm thankful that my influence was able to help her do that, because now she's not wasting money on that stuff, and it's not causing her to feel like garbage every morning when she would wake up and then feel sleepy and groggy all throughout the day. She's still got some aches and pains from other decisions she's made in her life, I think, but also I still think she suffers from some of the inflammation that comes with eating some of the foods that cause inflammation that you don't get when you're eating a carnivore diet. For me, even pork and chicken tend to cause an inflammatory response, but for a lot of other people, a carnivore diet, they can eat all the pork, all the chicken, all the fish they want, and they don't have any issues. I also happen to be allergic to fish, so that makes it harder for me to eat fish. And that's one of the reasons I supplement iodine, is I can't really eat seafood. I could eat things like oysters and scallops and things like that, but the ruminant meat thing has got me so convinced that that is the way to go for my body to function right. I really don't like the idea of eating the bugs and the filters of the sea either. I used to love shellfish, but I've just been staying away from them because, those are the unclean creatures of the water. Even when you look at like biblical standards of what's clean and unclean, fish were on the list, but not most shellfish. So I figured it's better for me to stay away from those, and I just supplement the iodine. I have had some shrimp before, but one of the problems when you buy shellfish is very often fish get mixed in with the shellfish during the process, or they're on the store shelf with fish, and the oils on the fish get on the food that I'm going to eat. And I've had my lips get all blown up, and I get my eyes watery and start to close, kind of like what's his name? Will Smith was on that movie Hitch.
Yeah.
When he ate a shrimp. I wasn't as bad as he was, but it was bad enough to where my wife and I were out at an event at the Moose Lodge that my stepfather had taken us to. And we were out dancing and stuff. And I had a few pieces of shrimp, and my eyes closed up and my lips were all swollen, and I had to leave. So I found that I've had to leave those alone as well.
Yeah, I know I'm allergic to squid, and I had calamari once at a steakhouse when I was like 22 or something. I never had it before, and I was taking my very last little squealy breath before I died when the ambulance got there and put the shot in me that like did away with it. It's some kind of an adrenaline thing, makes your heart feel like it's gonna explode too. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I've
so,
had that reaction to tree pollen as well. When I was up in the mountains one time, I felt like I was going to die if they didn't open up my body and let air in, because I
yeah,
couldn't breathe. And that's the scariest thing in the world, when you can't breathe.
yeah. So, do you have anything else you would like to say to people, or?
Well, you had asked something else previously that I didn't answer, is how could you get started doing this?
Oh
And I
yeah,
think I did sort of answer it in some parts, and this would be the most important thing to leave people with anyway. If you want my advice, you could get the whole story in one video on my channel, 125 days on lion diet, and you'll see how I started, because I take you from day 1 to day 125. I do skip around, skip through it, because otherwise the video would have taken 4 or 5 hours. It's like a 45-minute video, but it really gives you and how I got started, everything, including making all the meat at one time, how I would put the salt in my drinks, and how all that changed everything. I've later learned that I don't need as much salt as I thought I did. I finally discovered that what was causing the extra tightness in my muscles in the morning was I could cut back on the salt now. Once I started cutting back, I cut back to about 25% of what I was doing before. I only put salt in one out of every, I drink 4 to 6 liters of water every day, or club soda. I used to put it in about 80% of those bottles. Now I put it in 25% of them. And that gives me enough electrolytes where I don't feel tired, but it also, all the muscle tightness that I had before, where I've talked about on my channel about doing yoga. I was doing yoga because I just felt like my muscles were so tight they were going to snap. And now that's gone away. So I remember Dr. Chaffee talking about how you might need salt a little bit early on, or he didn't say you might need it early on, but at some point you don't need it. And I've had a lot of other people on the channel tell me that they needed it at first and then they didn't need it as much later. So I still salt my food plenty. I just don't use as much salt in my water. And I've noticed in that area, I still do a little potassium and magnesium now. That's something that's relatively new. And overall, it's been good. But the key was just deciding when you got started was that you're going to make sure you had the food available so you wouldn't give in to cravings. Make sure the meat was ruminant meat. So typically steak or lamb, or beef or lamb. And if you're trying to keep it on a budget, probably a lot of hamburger meat. And then salting your food. And if you feel like you don't have energy, add a little bit of salt to your water. I did that heavy salting of my water for well over 2 years. It's only recently that I've discovered that I don't need as much as I used to. And I tried to quit it once about a year ago. I tried to cut it back, and I still felt like as soon as I cut it back, I started to feel like I was going to lose that energy. And I was going to have one of those days where, like I had when I did Atkins and I went 4 days without vitamins, where I started to feel so droopy and tired that I said, nope, I got to stick with the salt. But lately I've been doing it now for about 10 days like this, and I haven't lost my energy. So I've been real happy with the change.
All right. Well, thank you. If you have any questions, leave comments down below, and, go check out Dante's channel. Check out his Facebook group, Freaking Freedom. It's one of the best carnivore Facebook groups that I've found out there. And, your 125-day video is great. I saw that months and months ago before I subscribed to your channel. And then I started watching your recent videos. And then it was like a month or so that I went back and I saw the 125-day video again. And I was like, oh, that's the same guy. This is the same channel. I didn't even realize that 125-day video was you now. That's how much change and difference there is in the way you look.
Well, I did shave my head too. And I guess it's probably good to let your audience know why that happened, because my hair did not fall out because of carnivore. I had been losing my hair in this area right here since at least 2011, because I went back and I found a picture of me where I was facing away, where you could see the bald spot growing. And I remember telling my wife for years, I'm like, oh, it's just a big cowlick. I convinced myself that I wasn't losing my hair, even though my hairline used to be down here and it was currently all the way up here. I still was saying I wasn't losing my hair, maybe a little bit up front, but that was it. And I had told myself when I was younger, because I remember working with this guy who had the most, forgive me for those of you who have comb overs, but he had the most ridiculous comb over. It was so obvious that he had just grown this hair out this long and flopped it over the top. And I thought, I am never going to be that vain that I'm just going to hold on to it like that. If I start to lose my hair, I'm just going to shave it off. But in those 10 years from 2011 to 2021, I never had the courage to stop hiding behind my hair. I started wearing a goatee when I realized how fat my face was in my 20s. I started wearing a full beard when I started to get fatter. I started growing my hair out during COVID. So I was really well hidden now. I felt like I was hiding this big guy that I was. And then when I look at pictures of me now, I realize, nope, you just look big with a lot of hair. And I decided, you know what? At first, I cut my hair normal length. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to go with a high and tight. I like the way the high and tight looks. I always wanted to be in the military. I wasn't able to join because they told me I was too fat the one time that I tried to join. And I tried the high and tight. But then when I saw that bald spot, even with the high and tight, I said, you know what? I'm just going to shave it all off. I'm tired of it. I'm not hiding behind it anymore. And it actually, I think it makes me look younger, not having the gray that I had in the beard. So I like it, but I did not lose my hair from meat. I've been told that that's what caused it, because you look at my before pictures and my hair was long. I had my COVID hair, and now I don't have any. It had nothing to do with the diet, except that it motivated me to finally follow through with what I always said I would do if I started to lose my hair.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was good talking to you, brother.
Yeah. Good
I'll
talking
see
to
you
you
next
too.
time.
All right. See you.